The story of Seth, son of Adam and Eve. Everyone needs to know. Bible stories. What if everything you thought you knew about Adam and Eve's lineage was incomplete? The story of Seth, their third son, holds secrets that reshape our understanding of humanity's spiritual journey. Today we'll uncover the extraordinary story of Seth, son of Adam and Eve, a tale that changes everything we thought we knew about faith, family, and divine purpose. Armalai. While most biblical narratives focus on the dramatic fall of Cain or the tragic death of Abel, Seth's story reveals something unprecedented: the first documented revival of true worship in human history. This isn't just another biblical story, it's the crucial missing piece that connects humanity's fall from Eden to the hope of redemption. To bring you this comprehensive analysis, I've spent months studying ancient Hebrew texts, consulting theological scholars, and cross-referencing historical documents. This research spans multiple biblical commentaries, including the Dead Sea Scrolls interpretations and early Christian writings, ensuring you receive the most accurate and insightful understanding of Seth's profound impact on human history. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just Seth's story, but how his legacy directly impacts your life today. You'll discover why Seth's birth marked a turning point in human history, how his lineage preserved the true knowledge of God, the secret behind his family's spiritual strength, and most importantly, how these insights can transform your own spiritual journey and family legacy. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will change how you view faith, family, and your own purpose in God's grand design. Part 1. The Birth of New Hope. The world was shrouded in darkness, both literal and spiritual. The ground, still damp with Abel's blood, bore silent witness to humanity's first murder. In the depths of their grief, Adam and Eve faced a reality far removed from the paradise they once knew. The Garden of Eden, with its perfect harmony and divine presence, now seemed like a distant dream, replaced by a harsh landscape where their firstborn had slain their second son. Picture, if you will, Eve's weathered hands pressed against her face, tears falling freely as she mourned not one, but two lost sons. Abel lay dead, and Cain, marked by God, wandered as a fugitive in the land of Nod. The first family of humanity was fractured, their home haunted by emptiness and the echoing absence of children's laughter. But in this moment of deepest despair, something extraordinary was about to unfold. The biblical account tells us that Adam knew his wife again, Genesis 4:25. A phrase that carries profound significance. This wasn't merely another birth. It was a divine response to tragedy, a new chapter in humanity's story that would reshape the course of spiritual history. When labor pains came, they were different this time. Eve, who had already given birth twice before, sensed something unique about this delivery. The air seemed charged with divine purpose, as if the very heavens were holding their breath. And then, in a moment that would echo through generations, Seth entered the world. Eve's words upon Seth's birth reveal the depth of this moment. God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. Genesis 4:25. The name Seth itself, derived from the Hebrew word meaning appointed or placed, carried the weight of divine purpose. This wasn't just a replacement son. This was God's answer to humanity's desperate need for redemption. Consider the significance of this naming. In ancient Near Eastern culture, names weren't merely labels. They were prophecies, destinies spoken into existence. When Eve named him Seth, she was declaring God's restorative purpose over his life. This third son would become the vessel through which hope would flow back into a broken world. The contrast between Seth and his brothers became evident early on. While Cain had been a man of the soil, marked by ambition and self-reliance, and Abel a keeper of flocks, Seth emerged as something entirely different. Historical Jewish texts suggest that even as a child, Seth showed an unusual sensitivity to spiritual matters. Unlike Cain, who built cities and sought to make a name for himself, Seth seemed to carry within him a quiet understanding of divine purpose. As Seth grew, witnesses would have noticed something remarkable about him. The text suggests a distinctive quality that set him apart. While the world around him descended further into violence and corruption, Seth maintained a connection to the divine that reminded others of what Adam and Eve had lost in Eden. He became a living bridge between the paradise that was lost and the redemption that was to come. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of Seth's birth was its timing. The biblical genealogies reveal that Seth was born when Adam was 130 years old. This specific detail, often overlooked, carries profound significance. For 130 years, humanity had witnessed the consequences of sin, the breakdown of family bonds, and the growing distance between God and man. Seth's arrival precisely at this moment wasn't coincidental, it was providential. Historical records and ancient Jewish commentaries suggest that Seth's birth marked the beginning of a new spiritual awakening. The Midrash tells us that with Seth came a renewal of divine knowledge, as if God had pressed a cosmic reset button on humanity's spiritual journey. This wasn't just the birth of another son, it was the birth of hope. In a world where Cain's lineage was building cities and forging weapons, Seth's birth represented something far more powerful: the preservation of true worship and the promise of redemption. His arrival wasn't just a comfort to grieving parents. It was God's master stroke in the grand narrative of human redemption, a divine appointment that would eventually lead to Noah, and through him to the salvation of humanity itself. As Seth grew from a hopeful newborn into a young man, he would face challenges that would test not only his faith, but also his understanding of his divine purpose. The world was changing rapidly, and with each passing year the contrast between his path and the way of Cain would become more pronounced, setting the stage for a spiritual battle that would echo through the corridors of time. Part 2. Growing Up in a Broken Paradise. Picture this. A young boy sits by a crackling fire under a star-filled sky, his eyes wide with wonder as his father Adam recounts tales of a paradise lost. This was Seth's childhood, a life lived in the shadow of Eden's gates. Every evening as the sun painted the sky in hues of amber and purple, Seth would gather with his parents, absorbing stories of a world that existed before sin cast its long shadow across creation. The garden, Adam would say, his voice thick with emotion, was filled with beauty beyond description. The trees, they seemed to dance with life itself, their fruits more vibrant than any you see today. And the animals, they would come when called, without fear, without hesitation. Eve would often touch her husband's hand during these moments, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, as she remembered the gentle breeze that once carried God's voice through Eden's paths. But Seth's world was startlingly different. The ground beneath his feet was hard and unyielding, demanding sweat and toil for every morsel of food. The thorns and thistles that God had promised as part of the curse were a daily reality, tearing at clothes and flesh alike. Yet there was something remarkable about young Seth. Where others might have grown bitter, he found purpose in the contrast. As Seth grew, he would often walk to the edge of their settled lands, gazing eastward toward the place where the cherubim stood guard with their flaming swords, protecting the way to the tree of life. These moments became his own private communion, a time to contemplate the vast difference between what was and what could have been. The Bible tells us that men began to call upon the name of the Lord in the days of Seth's son Enoch. But this spiritual awareness clearly began with Seth himself. In those early years, the world was changing rapidly. Cain's city of Enoch was growing in the distance, its buildings reaching higher with each passing season. The sounds of metalworking from Tubal-Cain's forges would echo across the plains, and the music of Jubal's lyres would drift on the wind. It was a world embracing progress. but at the cost of its connection to the Creator. Seth witnessed this transformation with a wisdom beyond his years. Unlike his brother Cain, who sought to make a name for himself, Seth seemed to understand that true greatness lay in remembering and preserving the knowledge of God. He would spend hours with his parents, not just listening to stories of Eden, but learning the deeper truths about the Creator's nature and promises. The contrast between Seth's upbringing and that of Cain's children couldn't have been more stark. While they built cities and developed arts and crafts, Seth's family maintained a simpler life, one focused on maintaining their relationship with God. This wasn't mere primitive existence. It was a conscious choice to prioritize the spiritual over the material. As Seth matured, he began to understand the weight of his position. He wasn't just another son of Adam, he was a bridge between two worlds. Behind him lay Eden and humanity's fall. Ahead lay an uncertain future where mankind's relationship with God hung in the balance. The Scripture's careful tracking of his genealogy, leading eventually to Noah and beyond, testifies to his crucial role in maintaining the line of faith. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Seth's character was his ability to thrive spiritually in a world that was increasingly hostile to divine truth. While the descendants of Cain were building monuments to human achievement, Seth was building something far more lasting, a legacy of faithfulness that would eventually help preserve humanity through the flood. The true testament to Seth's character came during a pivotal moment when the allure of Cain's civilization was at its peak. Legends speak of a time when the achievements of Cain's city seemed unstoppable, when every technological advance and artistic creation seemed to mock the simple faith of Seth's family. It was then that Seth made his most significant choice: to establish a separate community dedicated to preserving the true worship of God, a decision that would echo through generations and ultimately save humanity's connection to its Creator. This period of Seth's life demonstrates a profound truth. Sometimes the most significant acts of faith occur not in dramatic moments of confrontation, but in the quiet daily decisions to maintain truth in the face of attractive alternatives. Seth's childhood in a broken paradise shaped him into a man who could bridge the gap between Eden's memory and humanity's hope for redemption. As Seth's understanding of his role deepened, the world around him continued its dramatic spiral away from God's intended path. The contrast between his way of life and that of Cain's descendants would grow ever sharper, setting the stage for a conflict that would define the future of human spirituality. But that's a story that takes us into an even more fascinating chapter of this epic tale. Part 3: The Two Paths, a World Divided. As the world after Eden continued to unfold, a profound division emerged that would shape the course of human history. Picture, if you will, two rivers flowing from the same mountain, one pure and clear, the other increasingly murky. This was the world of Seth's time, where humanity found itself at a crucial crossroads. In the fertile valleys east of Eden, Cain's descendants had begun to establish themselves. Their cities rose like defiant monuments against the sky, each tower reaching higher than the last. The sound of hammers and the clash of metal filled the air as they forged new tools and weapons. Lamech, Cain's descendant, walked the streets of these cities with pride, boasting of his power and speaking of vengeance 77 times greater than Cain's. The biblical records tell us that these people became skilled craftsmen, musicians, and metalworkers. Their achievements were remarkable, but their hearts grew increasingly distant from their Creator. Meanwhile, in the quieter regions where Seth's family had settled, a very different way of life was taking shape. Here, the morning air was filled not with the sound of construction, but with prayers and songs of worship. Seth's people lived closer to the land, maintaining a simpler existence that reflected their spiritual focus. They were not opposed to progress, but they understood that true advancement meant growing closer to God, not just building higher walls or stronger weapons. The contrast between these two societies became more striking with each passing generation. In Cain's cities, wealth accumulated and innovation flourished, but so did violence and corruption. The book of Genesis records that these were times of increasing wickedness, where every intention of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil continually. The daughters of Cain's line were known for their beauty, and the sons for their might. They became what the ancient texts call men of renown. But in Seth's community, a different kind of renown was emerging. Here, people began to call upon the name of the Lord, a phrase that in Hebrew suggests not just casual prayer, but the establishment of regular, organized worship. They preserved the stories of Eden, passing down not just the tragedy of the fall, but the promise of redemption that came with it. While Cain's line built monuments to their own glory, Seth's line built altars to gods. As these two societies developed, their interaction became increasingly complex. The biblical narrative hints at the tension between them, particularly when it mentions that the sons of God, often interpreted as Seth's righteous line, began to notice the daughters of men, understood as Cain's line. This attraction between the two groups would eventually contribute to the corruption that led to the Great Flood. The contrast reached its peak during the time of Enoch, Seth's great-great-great-grandson. While the cities of Cain's descendants reached their zenith of technological achievement and moral decay, Enoch walked with God so closely that he was taken directly to heaven without experiencing death, a powerful symbol of the different destinies awaiting these two paths. What makes this division particularly fascinating is its relevance to our modern world. This same choice between material progress divorced from spiritual values and a life aligned with divine purpose continues to challenge us today. The cities of Cain's descendants, with their impressive achievements and moral bankruptcy, mirror our own sophisticated but often spiritually empty societies. The tension between these two paths would ultimately reach a breaking point. As the world descended further into corruption, only Noah, a descendant of Seth, would remain righteous in his generation. The great flood that followed wasn't just a natural disaster. It was the inevitable conclusion of this great division, where the path of righteousness had narrowed to a single family. This division wasn't simply about different lifestyle choices, it represented fundamental differences in how humans understood their purpose and relationship with God. Cain's line sought to overcome the curse through human achievement, while Seth's line sought redemption through maintaining their connection with the Creator. But the story doesn't end with this division. Through Seth's lineage, a flame of hope continued to burn, leading to one of the most remarkable figures in biblical history, a man whose walk with God would set the stage for humanity's greatest test of faith. Part 4. A Legacy of Faith. In the shadow of a world growing increasingly distant from its Creator, a remarkable transformation was about to unfold. The birth of Enoch, Seth's son, would mark not just another generation, but the dawn of humanity's first spiritual awakening. Picture, if you will, a time when the memory of Eden was fading like twilight, and the corruption of Cain's lineage cast long shadows across the land. Seth, now a father, would often sit with young Enoch under the vast canopy of stars. Their conversations weren't mere family tales. They were bridges spanning the chasm between paradise lost and hope renewed. With eyes reflecting both wisdom and longing, Seth would share stories of the garden, of walks with God in the cool of day, and of a promise that seemed to pulse through their very bloodline. But something stirred in Enoch's heart that was different from all who came before. The biblical record tells us that it was during his time that people began to call upon the name of the Lord. Genesis 4:26. This wasn't a simple statement of fact. It was a seismic shift in human history. Consider the magnitude. For the first time since Eden, organized worship emerged from the chaos of a fallen world. Imagine the scene as it unfolded. Small groups gathering under open skies, their voices rising in prayer and supplication. This wasn't the mechanical repetition of ritual, it was the raw, authentic cry of hearts seeking their Creator. Enos, carrying his father's legacy, but blazing his own trail, became the catalyst for this spiritual revolution. The contrast with the surrounding world couldn't have been more stark. While Cain's descendants built cities of stone and forged weapons of bronze and iron, Seth's line was building something far more enduring, a community of faith. Archaeological evidence from this period shows advanced metalworking and urban development, yet amidst this material progress, Seth's family maintained their focus on the eternal.
But this awakening didn't happen in isolation. The text suggests a fascinating detail often overlooked. This revival spread. The phrase, began to call upon the name of the Lord, uses the Hebrew word hugal, indicating not just a beginning, but a breaking forth like water from a spring. What started in Seth's household became a movement that spread through the ancient world. The impact was profound and far-seeking. This wasn't just about personal devotion. It was about preserving the true knowledge of God in a world rapidly forgetting its creator. Through Enos, Seth's legacy evolved from personal faithfulness to public witness. Historical records and biblical genealogies show how this spiritual heritage was preserved through generations, eventually flowing through Noah and beyond. As darkness gathered around them, Seth's family became like beacons in the night. Their homes weren't just dwellings, they were sanctuaries where the name of God was honored and his presence sought. The ancient Hebrew text suggests that their worship wasn't just about words, it was about living in conscious awareness of God's presence, making every aspect of life a form of devotion. The story reaches its crescendo in an unexpected way. While the world around them descended into violence and corruption, this faithful lineage grew stronger. Each generation added its own chapter to the story. Kenan, Mahalalel, Jared, each name representing not just a link in a chain, but a torchbearer in increasingly darker times. This spiritual awakening laid the groundwork for what would become humanity's understanding of worship, prayer, and divine relationship. It was the first organized response to God's presence since Eden, setting patterns that would echo through thousands of years of religious history. As remarkable as this spiritual revival was, it was just the beginning. The legacy of faith that began with Seth and flourished under Enos would soon produce some of the most extraordinary figures in biblical history. Among them would be a man who would walk so closely with God that he would never taste death, and another who would save humanity itself from destruction. But that's where our story takes an even more fascinating turn. Part 5, The Faithful Lineage. From Seth emerged a lineage that would shape the course of human history, a bloodline carrying divine purpose through generations of mounting darkness. As we trace this remarkable family tree, we discover how each generation faced increasingly difficult challenges, yet maintained an unbroken chain of faith that would ultimately save humanity itself. The story begins with Enoch, Seth's son, whose name means mortal or weak one. This humble name belied the spiritual giant he would become. It was during Enosh's time that a remarkable transformation occurred. Then people began to call upon the name of the Lord. These words, recorded in Genesis 4:26, mark a pivotal moment in human history. Imagine the scene, small groups gathering in the shadows of a world growing increasingly hostile to divine truth, their voices rising in prayer, creating a stark contrast to the bustling cities of Cain's descendants with their focus on material glory. But it was Enoch, Seth's great-great-great-grandson, who would demonstrate just how close humanity could walk with God. The biblical record tells us something extraordinary about Enoch. He walked with God. These 4 words, simple yet profound, hint at a relationship so intimate that it would culminate in one of the most mysterious events in biblical history. The text tells us that Enoch walked with God. Then he was no more, because God took him. In a world where death had become the unchangeable rule since Adam's fall, Enoch never saw death. His disappearance stood as a powerful testimony that true faithfulness could transcend even mortality itself. The lineage continued through Methuselah, whose life would span 969 years, the longest recorded in biblical history. His extraordinary lifespan served a divine purpose, for his life would become a living countdown to one of history's most momentous events. The mathematical precision is striking. Methuselah died the very year the Great Flood began. His name itself carries prophetic weight, meaning, when he dies, it shall come. Every day of his nearly millennium-long life was a testament to God's patience, with a world spinning increasingly out of control. Then came Lamech, who lived in times so dark that he named his son Noah, meaning rest or comfort, saying, "This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed." These words reveal the desperate hope of a people longing for relief from the curse that had plagued humanity since Eden. Little did Lamech know just how prophetic his words would prove to be. Finally, we arrive at Noah, the culmination of Seth's faithful lineage. The Bible tells us that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, a simple statement that carries extraordinary weight. In a world where every intention of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil, continually, Noah stood as a solitary beacon of righteousness. The text emphasizes that Noah was perfect in his generations, suggesting not just moral uprightness, but the preservation of a pure lineage that had not intermingled with the corrupted lines. The significance of this lineage becomes clear when we understand the mounting pressure each generation faced. While Cain's descendants built mighty cities, developed advanced metallurgy, and created the first musical instruments, Seth's line maintained their focus on spiritual matters. They lived as sojourners in a world growing increasingly hostile to their values. Each generation faced greater temptations to compromise, to join the apparent success and sophistication of those who had turned from God. Yet through it all, they maintained their distinct identity. This wasn't mere stubbornness or tradition. It was the preservation of humanity's last connection to its creator. The flood would come not just because of humanity's wickedness, but because something fundamental to God's purpose for humanity was in danger of being lost. As we reflect on this remarkable lineage, we see how Seth's initial faithfulness set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately preserve humanity itself. Through increasing darkness, through mounting pressure to conform, through generations of maintaining their distinct identity, this family line carried the hope of redemption like a torch passed from father to son. But the story doesn't end with Noah. In fact, it was just beginning. And the greatest test of this faithful lineage was yet to come, as Noah would face the ultimate challenge of preserving not just his family's faith, but life itself on earth. This unbroken chain of faith, stretching from Seth to Noah, reminds us that our choices echo through generations. Each link in this chain faced their own trials, their own temptations to compromise, yet they held fast to their divine purpose. Their story continues to resonate today, challenging us to consider our own role in the ongoing narrative of faith and purpose. As we conclude this profound journey through Seth's story, we've uncovered timeless truths that resonate deeply with our modern lives. Seth's legacy teaches us that even in life's darkest moments, hope can emerge and reshape destiny. His story isn't just ancient history, it's a powerful blueprint for living with purpose in our own challenging times. Consider how Seth's quiet faithfulness changed the course of human history. In a world that celebrated power and self-glorification, he chose a different path, one of steady devotion and unwavering faith. Through his lineage, we witness how single choices can echo through generations, creating ripples that touch countless lives. But here's the challenging question that confronts each of us today. What legacy are we building? In a world that often feels as morally confused as Seth's time, how will we choose to live? Will we, like Seth, dare to stand firm in our convictions, even when the cultural current pulls us in the opposite direction? Seth's story compels us to examine our own lives. Are we, like him, building something that will outlast us? Are we passing down values that will strengthen future generations? These aren't just rhetorical questions, they're invitations to reshape our own story. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this powerful biblical narrative. What aspect of Seth's story resonates most with your own journey? Share your reflections in the comments below. Perhaps you've faced similar challenges in maintaining your faith or values in a challenging environment. Your story could inspire others who are walking a similar path. Do you have questions about other aspects of Seth's life or his descendants? Drop them in the comments section. Your questions often lead to fascinating discussions that enrich our entire community's understanding. If this exploration of Seth's story has impacted you, please share this video with someone who might need this message of hope and purpose. Every share helps spread these timeless truths to those who need them most. Before you go, I want to thank you for joining me on this profound journey through one of the Bible's most powerful yet often overlooked stories. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We're diving deep into more fascinating biblical narratives that will challenge, inspire, and transform your understanding. Remember, like Seth, you too have been appointed for a purpose. Your life, your choices, your faith matter more than you might realize. Until our next exploration of biblical wisdom, may you walk with the same quiet strength that made Seth a pillar of faith in a challenging world.